Hi, I'm Suzanne. I'm a co-chair for the Ann Arbor chapter of Start School Later. And I'm here with Jamila James. She's running for the school board. So I have a couple of questions for you about starting school later. The American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Medical Association, as well as the Centers for Disease Control and the National Sleep Association, all identify early school start times as the crucial contributor to adolescent sleep deprivation. Most organizations recommend that all middle and high schools start after 8:30. So the question is, do you believe school districts should be responsive to these National Health Organization recommendations?
Yes, I think that science tells of us a lot of things about what's correct and what's the most healthy for our bodies and for us to protect ourselves and be able to get through all the things that we have to get through. But our society is so rush, 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 rush. We don't really take consideration what science has already told us what is right. So I'm a person, I love science. I'm a nurse. Um, and I also, for having three kids go through this system, and one had to get up like at 6 o'clock in the morning to get to the 7 o'clock bus to get to 8 o'clock class. It's just ridiculous. And she was always tired. And the same thing with my son. It's kind of irresponsible for us to expect them to perform the way they need to perform when we know that they're not getting enough sleep, which helps the brain, that helps them perform the way they're supposed to perform. So I know that it's very inconvenient and it might even be controversial to some people, but that's what's best for our kids. And we want what's best for our kids, even if it's inconvenient for us.
All right. So the next question is, in what ways do you think later school secondary start times would benefit adolescents?
Well, I know from my studies and from being a parent that teens aren't getting enough sleep. They need sleep just as much as little kids do, how kids used to have a nap. So and and it's also a part of the fact that they're doing so much development right then. They're growing so much. They need the rest for their body to grow. So it's up to us. I think that it will be very beneficial to them. It can't be anything but positive. As long as we don't spend that time like, oh, school starts at 9 o'clock now. So we'll do this in the morning instead. Like, let them get their rest.
Yeah. Okay, great. So currently under COVID, I think I understand, but I could be wrong, that some of the secondary schools have later school start times. Um, are there any barriers that you can see to implementing later start times once we return to in-person classes?
The only barrier I can see is that it's not going to be it won't be as smooth of a transition and that it will be uncomfortable. But again, I believe with anything that has to do with our children, and this is one of the things about me running on the school board, I know there are a lot of things that I really want to change, but people have to be willing to first acknowledge the fact that it does need to be changed. And I don't think there's well, to me, there's no real question to that. And then the next is the understanding and willingness that change takes time, not a whole lot of time, but it takes time and it's difficult and challenging and scary and all these things. There's a lot of resistance to change. But since we've already set the pattern of starting at 8:30 right now, it's the 8:30 start time. There's no real reason that we can't get it done for a later school start time once schools start. It's just going to be inconvenient, and we're gonna have to have the will to get it done.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about safety in terms of trying to sync the school travel times with dawn and sunset in Michigan winters, and also anything that you're thinking about in terms of environmental concerns related to building heating related to school start times?
Building heating. I've never thought about that perspective of it. The building heating. What would be the concern with heating the building? Is it the fact that you'll have to heat it later, or what are some of the concerns with that as far as the heat?
Oh, not particularly concerns necessarily. In fact, we're heating buildings, starting at 5 a.m. now.
Okay. Oh, so I guess that means we can start heating them up a little bit later, which means we'll save a little bit of money all over the district, and it won't be just pennies because those are big buildings and it's a lot of buildings, so that would be a positive to it. I'm sorry, I latched on to the back part of that question. What was the front part?
Having to do with the sunset and sunrise times in Michigan,
Yeah.
and travel times for adolescents and kids.
As I mentioned before, so my children have always taken a school bus to school, and there were plenty of times where they were walking out when it's still dark outside. And not to just say for girls in particular, but for my daughter, I was really concerned. The top crime in Ann Arbor is usually rape, right? And rape is about power and stuff. And then you have my teenage girl walking through the dark to get to her bus stop early in the morning. That's a problem. Or even the late at night. But I think that I respect more the 5 o'clock at night than I do the early in the morning, because at least in the evening people are out and about versus you just out early in the morning when nobody's around. I don't like that. I don't think that's safe for any of our children. And of course, boys get raped too. Don't want to say that that's not. But it is a safety concern about being raped or being robbed or just being disturbed while you're in your space. And then you have to take a consideration that these are children, regardless of how they think they're not children. These are children, and they're still learning to navigate the world. And a lot of parents don't teach their children, at least in Ann Arbor, I don't believe they do, about being street safe. So I'm from Detroit, and being from an inner city and an inner city within an inner city, um, I have a lot of street smarts about certain things and how to protect myself. But I find that our 25 miles of bubble of reality of Ann Arbor that we get, it's kind of lax. It's really lax. And you know, crime happens in all shades and colors in all environmental, social environment. So I think it's just a safety issue. Did I say too much?
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. I just have, yeah, just one more question. Do you feel like changing high school or secondary start times would have any influence on Ann Arbor's leadership role in Michigan public education?
I think that that'll be a beautiful thing for the whole reimagining schools. My thing, the reason why I'm running for the board, well, one of the many reasons that I'm running for the board is, if I'm a firm believer, if we're in the process of reimagining schools and the pandemic has given us a unique opportunity to do so, like how we have the online schools now, then I say reimagine it completely before we go back. We can fix all the things that we know are wrong, that are not scientifically supported. We have an opportunity to do it now with less disruption because everything's blown up now anyway. So why not, when we go back, let's do it right. Let's support our kids fully. And we know how important sleep is. No one can deny, that knows anything about science and how the human body works, knows how, can say that sleep is not important. It's very vital. And these babies are still growing, their brains not developed yet. And you throw in the testing and the long days and getting up all early. All of this is detrimental to them. We want them to grow into adulthood without the stress and the anxiety and all the craziness that is now put on them, because we're putting more pressure on them. We're telling them that we have this expectation of what they're supposed to be in adulthood, but at the same time, we're not preparing them to be the best they can. We're setting up bad habits. So yes, we need to do that. You got me on a tangent again. I'm just passionate about kids and treating them right. And I don't understand. It goes with the whole equity thing too. It's like, if you know the right thing to do, why don't you just do it? Just do it. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's the right thing to do. And it's going to make everybody in the long run better off. But we're so concerned about what's convenient. But guess what? Life is inconvenient as hell. So we got to work it out and do what's best for our babies.
Oh, I guess for full disclosure, I should say that I've known you, Jamila, for 20 years. So
Yes,
for full
yes,
disclosure for the audience,
yeah.
as you
But
know, we
you also know this is how I am regardless.
that's true. Um, uh, I should say also that we can't, that we can't and don't endorse. We're an advocacy organization, so we advocate for later school start times, and we don't endorse. But we're going to, this will be for people to see about people's opinions on the school board. And thank you for spending time talking to me. It's always good to see you.
You're welcome. It's always good to see you, sweetheart. Have a blessed night.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Such a mess. Bye, Suzanne.
Bye. Bye.